great point-counterpoint here because we have Dr. Sebastian Gorka on the line, Deputy Assistant to President Trump and author of the best-selling book, Defeating Jihad, The Winnable War. He was the former national security editor of Breitbart News. Now, Dr. G, on the last segment, we had an attorney on who was coming after the president's executive action on immigration. I think some of his arguments were pretty thin, but let me give you basically the gist of them. First of all, his main complaint was this really is a Muslim ban. It's the beginning of a slippery slope, and it's just a gussied up, dressed up way of trying to ban a certain religion piecemeal from this country. Your response?
Well, then I guess the Obama administration were Islamophobes as well, because the list of 7 nations, which we've actually reduced to 6, excluding a very large country called Iraq. That list was inherited from the Obama administration's analysis of.
Could you spell that for me? Countries. Is that AROCK? I just want to make sure I get this Iraq country correct.
So if it's Islamophobic, then he's positing Islamophobia against President Obama. The fact is, we agreed with the threat analysis from the Obama administration, which is also had concurrence from the Congress as well, that these are the 7 nations that are most problematic when it comes to national security vetting for immigration and for refugees. And again, I cannot make this point enough times. If there were any dread ulterior motive to this executive order with regards to Islam or Muslim nations, then why is the largest Muslim nation in the world, Indonesia, not included? Or why is the largest Arab Muslim nation in the world, Egypt, not included? This is about national security, very, very simply.
So the ACLU tipped their hand today, I heard in an interview on a government-funded public radio that could not sustain itself without funding from the government. Hint, hint, Dr. Gorka, if you could put a word in with the big man to maybe take care of that at some point. On publicly funded radio, the ACLU discussed how the crux of their argument against this executive action is going to be based off of previous comments by President Trump, that he has referred to it as a Muslim ban himself in the past. It has nothing to do with the text of the order itself. It has to do with the way the act was framed by the president. Your comments?
Well, again, I mean, that's incredibly telling, and it really is part and parcel of what I call the fake news phenomena. You look at the media, and they always focus in on half a sentence on a phrase and believe they can generate stories out of that. And that's the same in this case. When you're using shorthand for a very, very significant national security exercise, it's the broader instrument that needs to be analyzed, especially if it goes to a court of law, if somebody wishes to use legal instruments to analyze it. So, it's good to hear they've tipped their hand, but yet again, if you look at the order, the text of what it predicates and why it was brought, there is absolutely no way in the courts or outside of the courts using common sense to imply anything other than this is a national security measure that is in the purview of the president. Only the president has the prerogatives in the 1950s to determine who comes into the United States and against what metrics they are measured. That's not disputable. That cannot be passed in a court of law. It is laid down in national statute. And the ACLU may have an opinion, but the law remains the law.
One of the objections from the right about the latest executive order is that it does not go far enough. They were hoping for a little more out of the president. Is this a negotiating tactic? Is this a starting place? Or what can you say to those out there who think this action is not broad enough?
Well, we start from simply a clear-sighted examination of where the threats are. Again, the list can be shortened. You saw that it was shortened in the last month. It can be increased. There can be more nations added to it. It's a temporary measure, very important. This is 90 days. So it's something that is about the review of the system. But you look at those 7 nations, and there's one thing that links them. If you take Iran out of it, so Iran is a special case because they've been a state sponsor of terrorism since 1979. Every other country is home to the new caliphate, the Islamic State, ISIS, or is a hotbed for Al-Qaeda activity. So this isn't randomly chosen nations picked out of a hat. This is the most clear and present danger from individuals in active war zones that have groups who say, we will, have said this in English in their propaganda product, we will exploit the refugee streams and the migrant streams to insert our individuals, our operatives into those flows. It's just hard, cold analysis.
We've got Dr. Sebastian Gorka on the line from the White House, Deputy Assistant to President Trump and author of Defeating Jihad. I brought up a report from yesterday in Fox News where it said 300 refugees are subject to FBI terror investigations. There are about 1,000 people in all. This is Catherine Herridge, who's probably the best reporter over there at Fox. She's got 1,000 people are part of this probe. 300 are refugees. I asked our last guest, the attorney, Mr. Stock, is this just a coinky-dink? Is this a big coincidence that 30% of the refugees, 30% of the people in the terror probe are actual refugees? What say you, Dr. Gorka?
Look at, again, Catherine is a superb national security correspondent. Look at the broader picture. There have been, since September 11th, just under 600 successful terrorist prosecutions in the United States in the last 16 years. Approximately half of those put people in prison who were not born in the United States, so half of them. And of the number that were not U.S. nationals, about 36 were actually refugees or had asylum status. So again, this isn't hyperbole. This isn't fictional hypothesizing. It's based upon the facts of what's happened in the last 16 years. And most importantly, Alex, it's about preventing the next attack. Good counterterrorism isn't reactive. You don't wait until 120 people have been massacred at a rock concert in Paris. You don't wait until somebody steals a truck and mows down 80 people, as in Nice. What you want to do is to prevent the bad guys coming in, and that's exactly why the president brought his order.
Now, the blog Powerline, which is one of the most sophisticated and knowledgeable on right-of-center issues here, they expressed a concern that the executive action doesn't go far enough in preventing the possibility of sons and daughters of those who will still be admitted from becoming terrorists. This is a kind of a broad claim, but it is a compelling one. Your thoughts, Dr. G?
Well, that's another front in the war against global jihadism or radical Islamic terrorism. So we know full well that the author of the article should be fully aware of the fact that this administration understands that not all terrorism is done by foreign nationals or refugees. We've seen this. We've seen this with Nidal Hassan. We've seen this with other individuals here in the United States. So yes, there will be other measures taken that look at the issue of what you do with people who choose the life of jihad as a U.S. national or as somebody who grows to age of maturity and then decides to go down that path of killing their fellow American or plotting to do so. So remember, this is just one executive order, and nobody in the administration is positing that we are solving all counterterrorism issues with this one executive order.
Now, Dr. G, I know this will surprise you, but the president woke up this morning and started tweeting, and one of his tweets was about how there have been over 100 some odd prisoners recently released from Guantanamo that have returned to the battlefield. What can be done to stop this?
Well, we have to, change the policies that we've seen occur over the last 8 years. So we have an unbelievably high recidivism rate from Guantanamo Bay. The president has been clear that he understands the value of Guantanamo Bay, and what needs to be understood about that facility is it's not just a detention facility. It's also a very, very important intelligence asset. If you look at, the kinds of people that we've put in there and the kinds of intelligence we've gleaned from them. But the fact is, we don't simply for reasons, there's no ideology driving this administration that is about feeling good and releasing people when we feel that they're no longer a threat. If these individuals have chosen the life of jihad, and are committed to it, that means that in perpetuity, unless they distance themselves from it and reject it, they remain a threat to everything this nation stands for.
That's Dr. Sebastian Gorka. He's the Deputy Assistant to President Trump and the author of the best-selling book, Defeating Jihad, The Winnable War. What is the president's been quite busy, let's say, for the last couple of days. What do you think's next on his agenda, national security issues, Dr. G?
Well, the highest priority is, of course, the finalization deployment of the Defeat ISIS plan. So it's been drawn up by the generals, by Secretary Mattis, and now the final touches will be put to that plan. And then, the intent is, and it will happen, the president said so in his joint session, his address to the joint session of Congress, that we will obliterate the Islamic State and wipe this type of terrorism from the face of the earth. So the next large, muscle movement is going to be the Defeat ISIS plan's implementation.
It's Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Always a pleasure to have you on, Dr. G. Next time we'll have to get into a little bit of North Korea, get the latest on that one. Didn't have time today, but he's been back frequently, and we've enjoyed having him, and we will always enjoy having Dr. G, one of the legends of Breitbart lore.